Well, it is my pleasure to be here with Dr. Carolyn Leaf. She is a best selling author and a well sought after communicator, as well as a communication pathologist and a clinical neuroscientist. That's a bit of a
It
mouthful,
is.
but what got you fascinated with this interesting field of science?
From a little girl, I was fascinated with the mind and the brain. And it was something from a little girl, all I wanted to become was a neurosurgeon and find out about the brain and teach about the brain. And then I just grew up into that at very young. At university, I started getting into the research and I haven't stopped. And so just the absolute fascination for how we as humans, how the mind and the brain function, because they're two separate things. So that grabbed my interest from a very young child.
Yeah, now you've been doing research for quite a while.
Yes,
So what
almost
have
four
you been
decades.
what have you been learning about the mind and how it interacts with our body and faith?
Well, what it started out when I was a student sitting in one of the lectures, and our neuroscience professor was telling us about how the brain can't change. It was back in the 80s when they didn't believe the brain could change. And I just couldn't really, it didn't make sense. So I remember challenging and saying, not in a negative way, but saying, how is that possible? Because we as humans change. So, in a nutshell, he said, well, go do research. So I started researching, and I work with people with traumatic brain injury because there was very little research, because they thought, well, the brain, once it's been damaged, that's it. And I wanted to show that that's not the case. That if we can manage our minds, we can change the brain. And I showed that. I did some of the first neuroplasticity research and pretty much in the world at that time. And then I just carried on up until today. I work in the field of psychoneurobiology, which is mind, brain, body connection. So it's showing how the mind and the brain are separate and how they interact and influence each other. And how we as humans have this incredible, wise mind. We have this ability to look at our lives, look at the messiness of life. It's okay to be a mess, one of my favorite sayings, but as long as we know how to manage the mess. And so that's the core of the research that I'm still doing.